All right. Hello, everybody. Very excited to have you join us for today's Tuesday installment of the webinar, part of our ongoing series on tariffs, trade policy, and the future of e-commerce. First of all, a big thank you to everybody for migrating to a new platform so seamlessly. We're broadcasting these on Contrast now to keep ourselves current. They have some pretty cool features we're going to be taking advantage of. Should provide easier access to the recordings, an improved live Q&A, hopefully a smoother overall viewing experience for everybody tuning in. Please continue to share any feedback on the platform if you have it. It should be pretty clear. If anybody has questions, please drop them in the audience chat there. We've had such a great and lively Q&A for these sessions over the past several weeks. I'll keep a close eye on these as will Prince, as always. And a couple of PSAs as far as what's coming next. So we'll be back on Thursday at 4 o'clock with Kyle Henderson of Vision for a live session on supply chain data, impacts to tariffs. Should be a really engaging session. And then on Friday, Jack Perkins, the COO of North Star Sourcing, to dive into how tariffs are impacting the supply chain overall. Those links for event registration are on our Contrast page. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about how to register or sign up. But more importantly, today we have a special guest, Casey Armstrong, the Chief Marketing Officer of ShipBob. Hey, Casey, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Really happy to have you on the webcast. I'll give a quick introduction, folks. And as always, we'll have a really lively discussion, focus on some deep dive topics. Casey and Prince will run us through most of the discussion. So Casey brings a deep real world perspective to today's conversation. He's an accomplished marketing e-commerce leader. Prior to joining ShipBob, Casey served as the VP of Marketing at BigCommerce, one of the world's leading e-commerce platforms. He's grown several fast-moving companies across the digital and retail landscape from the ground up. But today at ShipBob, Casey leads the global marketing efforts, working closely with thousands of e-commerce brands to optimize their fulfillment operations and scale those operations effectively. So really thrilled to have Casey here. And as always, we will have a lively discussion, and glad to be representing Pietra and the Pietra platform to make sure that you all stay informed. So Prince, you wanna kick things off with our intro, and then we'll switch over to Casey. Yeah.
Let's do it. Wanna screen share? Okay, amazing. Welcome back, folks. For everyone else who's joining in as a repeat viewer, we appreciate you guys coming in. For anyone new listening on any of our live streaming platforms, appreciate you tuning in as always. So Tyler, if you want to go to the next couple of slides and want to give a quick background on Pietra, Tyler, before we jump in deeper.
Oh, sure. So Pietra, as many of you know, is a modern infrastructure platform for global commerce. And by that, we mean we support with the sourcing of new product. We have a full service 3PL that can help you fulfill all of your orders, marketing tools to help with distribution and reach a broader audience. And one key consideration that we've been making, especially during this time of tariffs and trade policy updates, is we want to make sure that we're keeping all of our users and customers informed. So that was the genesis of this webinar series. We've had such great feedback, responses, and engagement that we have continued to do these basically daily. So please stay tuned for what we have in store ahead. Follow us on LinkedIn. And if anybody ever has a question for the Pietra team, don't hesitate to reach out via that little chat bubble in your Pietra login screen, or email us at creators@pietrastudio.com. We are very responsive via all of our customer support channels.
Awesome. Very cool. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? And Tyler gave a great introduction to Casey previously. Casey, thanks for joining. We've had the opportunity to get to know each other over the last 4 or so years as I was building Factor Quality, which was ultimately acquired by Pietra, and then as you were taking ShipBob to new heights and new scales. The reason we're here today, folks, and Tyler, if we want to move to the next slide, is again to talk about one of the most pertinent conversations in the global sort of landscape of commerce today, which is about all things tariffs. And just as a quick reminder, nothing said on this call should be taken as legal or financial advice. Casey, I don't believe you're a licensed customs broker, right? But yeah,
definitely not. So I'll
okay,
give
so
the same mention there as well.
cool. So neither Casey nor I are licensed customs brokers, and so nothing here should be taken as legal or financial advice. But what we do know quite a bit about is all things commerce and e-commerce and supply chains. And so, Tyler, if we want to flip over to the next slide, where we have started here every day, folks, is with just a quick update on what is the latest and greatest in the world of tariffs. And for those who are joining, you might notice who are rejoining. This is a slightly different format that I've been using. It's now been 4 weeks almost since the Trump administration's Liberation Day, where it was first announced that there would be an increase in import duties and tariffs for goods coming in from a number of countries across the world for full container shipments, for e-commerce brands that historically have been importing under the de minimis loophole. And then there were certain country-specific tariffs that have fluctuated over the past couple of days and weeks. So where we are right now is for countries apart from China, a 90-day hiatus or pause on tariffs still continues to be in play. But for goods coming in from China, tariffs are now in play. These range anywhere from 125% to 245%, just depending on what is the product category, what is the HTS code for the product. And Casey, I think we're starting to see over the last week the first couple of container ships, right, with products that have been imported in a post-tariff world start to hit domestic United States shores and start to get fulfilled to end customers. So anything I missed here, Casey, or anything else just at a high level first you wanna chat about or you've been seeing in your data?
I think the most interesting thing to come out, and I have some stuff to share too if we want, but I think one of the more interesting things that we've seen, especially at the consumer level, is the marketplaces starting to show the tariff impacts in the pricing as well. And so if you go to a marketplace like Shein or Temu, which seem to be semi-targeted with some of these because they were really maximizing not just the tariff, but especially the de minimis exemption in regards to the costs. And now they're putting that into the pricing on their marketplaces. And, it'll be interesting to see how Amazon really goes about this as well. So, because I think once you get the masses, aka the consumers versus the individual brands, that's where it can get very noisy, and we'll see how that impacts any changes in how the current administration is handling this.
Awesome. And Casey, I mean, this is a great segue. Tyler, if we want to stop screen sharing, and then Casey, if you want to pop open a couple of slides, let's talk about the downstream economic impact that these policy changes are happening on brands and then on customers ultimately.
Perfect. I will pull that up.
So.
Great.
And folks, while Casey's pulling those up, don't hesitate to reach out in the Q&A. I'll spotlight any of those that are pertinent to the discussion at hand. Otherwise, we'll do a rapid fire Q&A round at the end. Looks great, Casey.
All right. I clicked the buttons properly.
Indeed.
All right, let's do this. So real quick, ShipBob, global e-commerce fulfillment solution. Again, we help. It's everything under one roof across all sales channels, whether that's D2C, whether that's marketplace, whether that's your retail and wholesale partners. We've got 60 plus facilities around the world, and which is very beneficial, especially in times like today where brands are really trying to figure out how they can split their inventory, let's just say across the United States, or utilize some of our global facilities to combat some of the tariff issues that are happening right now in the United States. And very proud with some of the brands we work with, like Bloom Nutrition and Pet Lab and Our Place and ClearStem and others. But let's get into the tariff side of things. So, some of this Prince covered. We write as of today because even later today, everything could be flipped up on its head. And so, it's, we definitely have a lot of empathy for everybody who's running a brand out there and how they're navigating this, because also a lot of you had products on the water when these tariffs were implemented, and you're getting slapped with that as it's hitting the U.S. ports. So there's a lot to obviously navigate. So again, I think it's pretty well known at this point where there was the 90-day pause. So on all non-China or I think non-China and Hong Kong goods, so the 10% reciprocal tariff. There are unique tariffs in Mexico and Canada, so this doesn't necessarily include those. And then Chinese goods right now have the 145% tariffs, and then sometimes those can be stacked up to almost 250%. Again, there continues to start coming out more and more changes around what is and is not exempted, and so that's where working with licensed brokers and others can be much more helpful in regards to like what exactly at this point in time can you get around. But we're going to talk about some ways to navigate some of this as well. As a lot of you are probably familiar with, if you're trying to handle this, is de minimis from China is essentially going away in less than a week. Again, that's one of the areas where Temu and Shein have been able to really maximize what's going there at scale, but there are a lot of brands and U.S. brands that were utilizing that, where they would import into the United States and then directly pull into Mexico or China, and then they would ship eaches or individual orders under that $800 amount, duty and tax free into the United States, and that is no longer. Right now, it seems like de minimis is acceptable from some other countries, but it'll be interesting to see what does the de minimis exemption look like long term, and then what does the current administration do with non-Chinese countries as well. Again, the higher next bullet, some of the higher tariffs for imports from other countries is currently paused, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then again, certain goods like pharmaceuticals are exempt, but even within some of the exemptions, you have to get into the minutia to see what is and is not excluded as well. So some of the items, I think it's interesting to actually, maybe real quick, I'll talk about just Shein and Temu as well. While they manufacture and sell a lot of first-party items, those as them as a marketplace, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, because they've been bringing on a lot of third-party sellers, both in China and around the world recently. And so for those that are less impacted by de minimis and the tariffs, that actually could be a great opportunity to utilize the traffic and the massive amount of consumers that they have on both of their marketplaces and apps to drive additional sales. And so there actually could be a window where there's a little bit less competition, or maybe there's like quote unquote fairer competition just from a pricing perspective, because some of these changes have impacted them more than others.
And Casey, maybe just adding a quick question in there that we've gotten a lot from the audience. So in the cases of Shein and Temu and any other e-commerce sellers that you've seen, what percentage of the increased cost of goods sold, so what percentage of the duty or the tariff, are you seeing the brands just eat and take a hit to their gross margins? And typically, how much are they passing along to an end consumer? Or is it all of it, are you seeing is getting passed along to the end consumer? So
maybe I'll jump forward a bit, especially for the sake of time. And so this is something that we partnered with our partner of ours called Elliott Davis on. Please take this also with a slight asterisk, because at one point these numbers are reflecting what the administration had put into effect. These continue to change quite quickly, and so how much are the brands eating versus passing on the consumers? We don't really have the data to provide that at, I'd say, a scale where it's as beneficial for for everybody on this call. But I think if you look at the impact from just a handful of examples on let's just say some popular items, like in this example, like a stainless steel water bottle, just like the printed paperboard, or this shirt made primarily of polyester. If you look at the increase, like for example, the stainless steel, it's essentially 150% increase from what it was before, from the $4 to, over $11. You look at the increase, from here with the printed paperboard, you might say, yeah, that's 13 cents, but you need thousands or tens of thousands of these every single month. That adds up very considerably. And again, that's well over double the price it was before. And then you look at something like apparel, where they were able to utilize, Section 321 to bypass some like the normal tariff rates. And that's a massive increase. And so for those goods, it's almost 3 times more expensive than it was before, which, if you include sales and marketing, fulfillment, everything else that these brands need to take in consideration, that might take a brand that was like rather profitable and put them into the red.
Got it. Makes a ton of sense. And super, super helpful to understand kind of the breakdown there.
Yeah. And so that's where it'll be interesting to see, from like the normal tariff rates to just some of these other items like Section 301, the IEEPA border, the reciprocal tariff. And I know that there have been also a lot of lawsuits just within the United States alone trying to combat and reduce some of these, and how that's going to shake out across, different raw material types, or HTS codes. Again, that's something that we're keeping a very close eye on.
Got it. Makes a ton of sense. Okay, super helpful.
Yeah. And so, please ask away as these pop up. I'll run through a couple other items. And so I think it's important to look at not just what we're seeing online, but can we look at what's happening in the stores as well? At times, I think that can be the canary in the coal mine of like what's disappearing from the shelves quickly. And so I think some of the first signs that we expect to see in retail is just some of these low cost goods, just because of a lot of the component sourcing from China. And as those, and because they're lower cost goods, the margins are much tighter. And so it'll be interesting to see how some of the major retailers and the brands that sell through the major retailers navigate that. Toys and kids goods. Again, usually it's shorter lead times. A lot of the stuff there is manufactured in China as well, especially a lot of the plastics. And then just as things come up with around some of the different holidays, again, there's usually very short lead time on those. And so it'll be interesting. And people are not ordering a ton, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Consumer electronics, again, a huge reliance on China for a lot of things in the electronic space. And there's often a lot of frequent product refreshes. And so from like a quantity perspective to what they expect to sell, again, that's usually pretty tight. And then fast fashion and apparel, again, fast turnover, lower margins, not necessarily a whole lot of buffer stock because you don't want to be left with a lot of old apparel and seasonal items. And so these are just some of the areas that we expect to be impacted first. And again, it's not just what you see digitally, but I think people should keep an eye on what they see in, at some of the major retailers as well. And so for brands, again, the tariff mitigation, it's really this 3-step process to retain market access and really focus on that business continuity. And so really starting just to really map your supply chain and understand what are the customs valuations, the classifications, compliance. Are you sure that you are up to par with everything there? Maybe even getting more granular than you had in the past, because there might be some exemptions that you can take advantage of. And just, again, really understanding your tariff exposure before you start looking at, maybe nearshoring or cross-shoring just some of the ways that you are manufacturing, which I know, Prince, is definitely in your wheelhouse. Then, of course, identifying these technical and operational solutions. And so just really mapping out where you impacted the most, and how can you just start stack ranking those based off of how you're being, it's really coming up with like a near term, a midterm, and a long-term plan based off of how you're evaluating how the current administration is going about this and what you think what might come down. So again, of course, minimizing your duties, looking at your supply chain structure. And so how are you, for example, something that we see with a lot of our customers, how are they fulfilling today? For example, if they're doing Section 321 out of Mexico or Canada, can they bring that in the United States? And while that might add some incremental costs, oftentimes brands that were doing 321 were just shipping out of one facility. And so let's say they were utilizing a 321 facility in Tijuana, Mexico. They'd often inject into San Diego and then ship everything from San Diego. Well, depending on your type of business, so take apparel, for example, you might have 30 to 40% of your orders coming in the Northeast. Well, if you start splitting your inventory, let's just say even in 2 nodes, much less 3 or 4 across the United States, you can likely greatly reduce your total fulfillment cost, but also reduce the transit time to improve the end customer experience as well. And so while you might get hit with some additional costs in parts of your business, how are there ways to drive a better customer experience and reduce some of those costs elsewhere? And then, of course, just creating this roadmap, map this out, again, stack ranking off of what are like the biggest items that are really these existential threats to your business in like the short term, so you can keep the lights on and really figure out like how can you plan to keep this long-term business. Again, I think in a positive way, a lot of these brand owners, they navigated the crazy roller coaster of COVID, where the demand just spiked. And I think a lot of us were spoiled based off of what was happening from a consumer demand perspective. And then things came back to, let's say, quote unquote, normal. There was like the reset, and brands have been able to come out and I think thrive more than ever before. And so, maybe this is just me being very optimistic, but I think there's the founders out there at large are pretty resilient and scrappy, just as entrepreneurs often are. And so again, just glass half full, I think, there's gonna be a lot of brands that can come out of this stronger than others.
It's a strong point of optimism, I think, during a period of time where a lot of brands are afraid, and there's a lot of uncertainty, in around the air. And I think, Casey, one of the things that you said a little bit earlier, 5 minutes ago or so, is before making any rash judgments about reshoring, moving entire parts of your supply base, making these large CapEx or OpEx decisions to your business, start with just like getting a really clear understanding of what is the current state of affairs, right? What is your risk exposure? How much will you actually be paying in duties and additional tariffs? So super helpful context there. Casey, I know we're limited on time, but I did want to slip in just a couple of core questions that we had historically gotten. And one of them will be very specifically about fulfillment. Chat with us a little bit about the concept of bonded warehouses and free trade zones, as that is a lever and an operational solution to your point number 2 that I think a lot of brands importing and distributing can use and leverage to find some cash flow relief in the current moment in time.
Yeah, so at the very high level is you can basically import into the bonded or free trade zone warehouses that would be located in the US, and you don't pay your duties and taxes until those until those are moved into, let's say, a non-bonded warehouse, which then you might fulfill from. And so you still have to pay those duty and taxes at one point, but instead of paying it all up front, it's more of like a cash flow play where Prince orders product X, then I can move his good from the bonded to the non-bonded and ship this out. And so that at that point, I've already made the sale. And so in theory, I already have that revenue, which I can then use to pay those duties and taxes at that time. And so that's the concept there. And again, it's more of like a cash flow play. I don't know 100% here, but this is where people need to dig into a bit is when will the duties and tariffs be basically marked, from when you imported into the US and what the duties and taxes were at that point in time, or when you make the sale, because you're basically making the bet in like a future state it's going to be lower. I believe it's from when you imported and what the duties and taxes were at that point in time, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, the minutia actually comes into whether or not the warehouse is a bonded warehouse or a free trade zone specific warehouse, and they actually have two different verdicts. I believe free trade zone warehouses are based on the duties at the point of or time of entry, whereas bonded warehouses are at the point of exit. So in a bonded warehouse, you're taking a bit more of a gamble to say, hey, look, will duties be lower or greater in a future state as opposed to today. So great call out there. Tyler, I know we only have about a minute or so left on the clock here. So, and Casey, I don't know if there's any kind of final points that you wanted to chat about, or Tyler, if there's any final questions we wanted to talk through.
Well, maybe in a follow-up, again, we can dive deeper, and this is much more technical, into like the non-dutiable charges to eliminate, what you actually are paying. And so there are certain things you can write off. And so I would check out, if you want to copy this, maybe I'll copy it over, which, under 19 USC 1401 AB4A, I would dig into that to, again, see what you can write off. Because there are certain things like trucking and maybe installation and interest that you're paying that you can actually write off. And right now, and basically lower the product value as much as possible. Some things to note is that you really need to have, separately identified on like different invoices and contracts and accounting records of like what these different line items are. Make sure that they're not bundled into the general price of goods, and then supported with documentation in case, the US Customs or CBP asks during an audit or entry review. And so again, brands right now, I think, are somewhat in a good way being forced to go much deeper into like what they're actually paying for and how they're declaring these. And so there might be some ways to reduce, your costs. But you need to make sure that you document that extremely well. And then again, with us, we've launched ShipBob Capital, so a financing program to help brands. So if you have any questions there, please reach out. Again, we've got our global facilities. I think the big item for us is our inventory distribution program, which you can call out here. Here's an example from a customer of ours. They were shipping everything from one facility. You can basically see the green is short zone, the yellow is medium zone, and the red is long zone. And you can kind of equate that to how long it will take to ship and how much it will cost. By utilizing 4 facilities, we were able to get everything essentially into almost everything into short zone or in region, and then some medium zone. And so that by inventory distribution, you can often reduce your total fulfillment cost by 20 to 40%, depending on how you were distributing before. So that's a huge focus. And so, yeah, again, for the sake of time, I think I'll wrap it up there. But if you have any other questions, my email's here, carmstrong@shipbob.com. We're happy to help.
Awesome. Super, super helpful. Well, Casey, thank you so much for hopping on and for joining us today. Tyler, any kind of closing words or remarks we want to give to the audience?
No, just to say thanks again for everybody who was able to join, and Casey for a tight 25 minutes. That was great.
Awesome.
Yes. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Prince, for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. Take care.
See you, everyone.
All right.